We are now joined by R.R. Rashmi, Distinguished Fellow from TERI. Rashmi was also Special Secretary in the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. Welcome, sir, to the program. Despite India being home to 17% of world population, its contribution to global carbon emissions is less than 4%. How do you assess India's strides in environmental conservation?
You see, our consumption of natural resources is amongst the lowest in the world. Today is the World Environment Day, and we are targeting the theme is ending plastic pollution. We consume almost 6% of the total plastics production in the world. But unfortunately, our generation in terms of waste is very large. So the problem of environmental management in India is that we are contributing very little to the pollution of carbon dioxide. But from the perspective of today's World Environment Day, the plastics, which is the theme and the major issue today, our contribution to the waste is very high. Almost 16% of the total, 16 to 17% of the total world's plastic waste comes from India. So we have to target this. And the reason why is that despite a very low plastic consumption, a very low consumption of natural resources compared to the developed countries, our waste management capacity is very limited. We are not processing the waste properly. We are not recycling it to the extent that it can be done. We are just leaving it in the open dumps, in the landfills, and or either we are incinerating it. So this is the real problem. The developed countries of the world which are contributing much higher to the global pollution, they are also able to manage their waste very properly. In fact, the total plastic waste which they are generating, they manage almost 90% of this. They are able to recycle it and move it into the circular economy, which we are unable to do either because we lack resources or because we lack the management systems within the country. Our municipal authorities, our regulations, and our industries, which are the major stakeholders in this, they have to really wake up to this and improve and strengthen their systems of managing this waste.
Okay. India has established plastic parks across different states to support recycling and innovation in plastic use. What more needs to be done at the government level and community level towards building a sustainable plastic economy?
This is one of the possible measures where we can involve. This is called a plastic market-based mechanism, where we pay the people for the waste which they collect, or the plastic bottles or any plastic material which they collect. They get some payment in turn for the plastics which they collect and give it to the collector. So this is one possible way in which we can incentivize or involve the markets in collection of the waste. This is exactly where the problem lies. Most of the waste that is generated in the country, plastic waste particularly, is not being collected. We generate about 9.3 million tons of plastic waste every year, and we collect only 50 to 60% of this. And whatever is collected is also not fully recycled. It is processed and then maybe it is converted into something else. But rest 30%, 30 to 35% is completely dumped in the open dumps, or it is incinerated. And that is where the problem lies. The single-use plastics, for example, which are the biggest source of this plastic pollution, government has banned it, but banning itself is not enough unless we are also able to involve the informal sector and the industries in the collection mechanism. Now the government has come up with a scheme called Extended Producers Responsibility, where they have fixed the targets for plastic manufacturers, importers, and plastic users to collect a certain portion of the plastics which they manufacture or sell. So this is a good measure, but again, it will depend on the correct and strict enforcement of the targets, which unfortunately the state governments, which are expected to enforce it through their state pollution control boards, they lack monitoring mechanism and enforcement mechanism. So there are a number of issues involved here. Setting targets is fine, but the gap is so large that we need this to become a large public movement and a campaign to be taken very seriously by the people who are involved in enforcing these regulations.
Okay, and how do you see India's legal and policy framework to do its bit in tackling this plastic waste crisis?
No, we have, for example, we have single-use plastics regulation. We have banned all the kinds of single-use plastic which is less than 550 microns. But again, as I was saying, banning is one part of the total, measures that we can take. But providing alternatives to the consumers is also an issue that we have to look at. But after all, consumer cannot be punished for what is the best and the most efficient and not using it. Plastics are the most efficient, the cheapest and the most economically affordable material. So the consumer has to be provided an alternative. We have not invested in the research and development of alternative biodegradable material which can replace the plastics. So that's another part of the problem. So we have single plastic waste management rules. We have extended producer's responsibility. These are all part of the legal framework that we have. But in addition to that, what is required is to create an ecosystem in which we generate biodegradable alternative materials. We invest in newer technologies, collection and processing technologies, where investment is required and industry needs to put its money in order to be able to process the waste that is being generated.
Okay, and finally, Rashmi, do you think, having discussed all this, that more needs to be done, but the consumer today is far more aware as far as opting for greener choices? We see a rise in e-vehicles, we see people opting for greener, sustainable practices. So do you think the consumer is more aware as far as opting for green choices is concerned?
Certainly, this is a good thing to happen, and I'm very happy that there is a momentum being created. The consumer is much more aware today of the greener choices, and the impact of their actions in environment is being appreciated by people. They are now waking up to the reality that they must consume responsibly. They must follow a sustainable way of life. The Prime Minister has already laid it down under the Mission Life, which is about using the resources as minimally and as frugally as possible.
Yes.
So India is already doing it very well. In fact, the very fact that India is consuming much larger resources at a much lower level compared to the rest of the world, our per capita consumption of any natural resource, you take it, whether it is plastics or carbon dioxide, carbon consumption, fossil fuels, plastics, timber, everything, it is very low compared to the rest of the world. So we are already living a very frugal and sustainable life. What we are not able to do is to manage the waste that is being generated. And that is where we need to gear up. Certainly the newer generation, which is exposed to the dangers of our unsustainable ways of life on the environment and our long-term growth, I think will be our ambassadors, and they will be the harbingers of the change.
Harbingers of change, beating plastic pollution is the theme of World Environment Day. Thank you very much, R.R. Rashmi ji, for joining us and sharing your perspective and analysis on the subject.